Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay in the back? Back there, can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, my name is Damian Zamias. I am State Chair of Communities and Schools of Pennsylvania, and I want to welcome everyone to the first ever Pennsylvania Dropout Prevention Network meeting. I am told that it's the first gathering of this sort really anywhere in the country to talk about and deal with the problem of dropouts here in Pennsylvania and in the country. Some people would consider it perhaps a crisis. I want to start by thanking Walmart for helping us found this conference and the network. Also want to acknowledge the efforts of Nathan Maines and the CIS staff for pulling together this program. Thank you, guys. This is our first gathering, and with many more to come, I hope, but it's a year's worth of work went into it. I want to talk just a few minutes about what dropout, what it really means to be a dropout. And the studies are very clear that for young people who drop out and do not go back to get a diploma or even a GED, higher rates of alcoholism, addiction, crime. One study showed that 75% of the people in prison did not graduate from their high school. So the societal costs are enormous. I think the best outcome for the vast majority of dropouts who do not return is, quite frankly, they're on the margins of American life, American society. So it's a significant issue, and I know that CIS has been working on it for decades, but there is no silver bullet. It's going to take a collaborative effort to really bring down the dropout rates, and if we're not successful in doing that, we are losing huge numbers of future Americans to the margins of society or worse. So I'm very pleased that we have such a great turnout. And we have a very brief video that I think Nathan has got teed up for us. One of the things that we hope to do is to raise the awareness level of the dropout problem. And it's now, and I think this conference is a big step in that direction. It's now my pleasure to introduce our co-chairs, Secretary Bev McElrath and Judge Dwayne Woodruff.
Good morning. Is everybody awake? Have your coffee? Today's going to be an exciting day, so wake up and enjoy all that we're going to learn today. I think the video was absolutely wonderful because there were a lot of really good messages on there that we need to remember as we move through today. I'm Bev McElrath, and I am I guess I can take the acting off. I am the Secretary of the Department of Public Welfare. And you may be sitting there saying, why is the Secretary of the Department of Public Welfare one of the co-chairs for the Dropout Prevention Initiative in Pennsylvania? And so I'd like to share a few statistics with you first, which may help with that answer. First off, 50% of the heads of households on welfare are high school dropouts. 50%. 75% of all high school dropouts are victims of abuse. Both neglected and abused children do poorly in school. They repeat grades, they have lower test scores, but neglected children fare the worst. 50% of prison populations are made up of dropouts. High school dropouts are 3 times more likely to be a welfare recipient than a high school graduate who did not attend college. As the new Secretary of Pennsylvania's largest department in state government, actually of any state government department in the country, with a budget of $28.6 billion, a department that deals with people who need public assistance, of a department that deals with our most vulnerable, abused children, housing of delinquents. I care about this population of children. And you know, I've learned that when you become a secretary, you are pulled in a billion different directions. And so for me, this one, the dropout of our kids is so important to me because I believe it is a piece that we can solve. There are some of the issues that we face that we can't do a whole lot about. This is one we can. And why do I say that? Well, first off, I say it because I don't believe that there's a child, or not a whole lot, certainly not that 14,000 every year, that wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm done with school. I'm not going to bother anymore. There's something that's caused them to feel that way. And I believe that much of what our dropouts go through begins at a very early age, and it's something that you can see. It's tangible. I think there are many kindergarten teachers who will say to you, you know what, I knew which kids 5, 10 years later were not going to stay in school. And when you say, what did you do? Probably what you heard is, well, I didn't know what to do. A couple of the things we know. We know that if a child can't read by 3rd grade, they are the most at risk for juvenile crime. So why can't we address that? When I came from York County, I'm from York County, and I was the Executive Director of Human Services before I came back to the state. And one of my key businesses there, the Gladfelder Company, one of the only paper mills that still exist in Pennsylvania, we partnered with them and I'm saying this for any business leaders that might be in, and ask them if they would adopt a second grade class and make sure every child could read. Dropout and kids' issues are community issues. They cannot fall solely on our system of education. Education has to be partners with us. So why do I care and why am I so involved in this? Because I truly believe we can make a difference and we can succeed in ensuring that these children do not drop out of school. I was asked to also talk to you a little bit about what does DPW do with dropout. We do too little. It's too late when we get involved. What we do is ineffective. Many times we remove children from their homes because they've dropped out of school, or we house them in our youth development centers. That's what DPW does, and that's just wrong. Removing children from their families because they won't go to school is not the answer. In fact, when they leave, they don't get the education they need, and they come back worse. Frequently, that starts them down the path to institutional settings, to living in institutions. So they go from our group homes to our institutions to adult prison. Removing children from their homes because they do not go to school is not the answer. Getting a referral from the school district when that child is 8 and beginning to disengage from school and allowing the community and our children youth agencies to provide services to those families, doesn't that make more sense? So what DPW does for this population is not what should be done. We're reactive versus proactive, and it's really time to change. So I'm so happy that all of you are here today. It's about a partnership. I'm a co-chair of this, along with Judge Woodruff from Allegheny County, who deals with these children and these families every single day at that level where they've committed crimes. He's going to talk to you about what he sees, but I am just so pleased to see so many people in the room. You know, some people say, oh, well, it's only a small percent. But for any child that we lose that drops out of school, we have lost an opportunity. It becomes very costly for us, and it affects the life of that child forever. I thank you so much for being here today, for caring, and this is really just the beginning. Now, Judge Woodruff, my co-chair, will talk to you. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Good? Great. My wife always tells me to make sure I speak up, so I try to speak louder so you can hear me. I do want to take this time to congratulate Bev. She is officially nominated for secretary, so congratulations. It's a great job. I arrived here last night about 11 o'clock. I'm a judge in Allegheny County in family court. I hear mostly juvenile and dependency matters. I'm one of those judges that have a tendency to work late, have cases late, and we get our lists, and I take my time, and I go until the list is finished. I had thought about telling exactly how many cases that I hear, from time to time, from day to day. But as I look at this audience here, all those things, all those statistics have been said before. So I thought last night, and about 2:30 or so, I came up with 5 points that I just want to throw out there for you to ponder, discuss, think about today. Take them back to your communities and discuss those there as well, because I think there are things that we should consider, we should think about. The school day and the school year. Is that something that you believe should be investigated? Should it be extended, one or the other? Should we have longer school days? Should we think about having year-round school? Statistics show that in 3 months, in the summertime, just about every single kid, when they come back, they have to catch up. Is that a good idea to have that 3 months of summertime? So think about that, and we want to talk about that as well. School climate, how important is it? And what all does it involve? And we're going to hear a lot more about school climate here today. So I'm not going to go over that, but think about that as well, because it involves more than teacher-student relationship. It also involves teacher-parent, teacher-community relationships as well. School suspensions. Should we push for suspension on all out-of-school suspensions and seek a more solutions-based result? There's a study called the Snow Day Study. On average, in an academic year, when an average number of unscheduled closures are 5, the number of third graders, and those kids are in the third grade, that is one of those red flag days. What's happening in third grade, so we can sort of predict what's going to happen as we go forward. Those people that are building prisons, that's what they do. Look at third graders, and they predict how many prisons, how many beds they need to make. But if you have 5 unscheduled snow days, the number of third graders performing satisfactorily on state reading and math assessments within a school is nearly 3% lower in years with no school closures. Not to mention that the Center for Civil Rights Remedies report indicates that suspension numbers show dramatic racial disparities. We need to come up with another solution to suspensions. There's a fight in school. Kid gets suspended for 3 days. I'm trying to figure out what good that does. It's an issue. For me, I don't think we should have school suspensions unless it deals directly with the safety of the child in the school. What about the way of teaching? Standards-based, which basically we have now, versus support-based. While having high standards is a good thing, and I think is necessary by all means, as we can see across the country, it's not the final answer. All our kids start off in an ocean of education, with the shoreline off in the distance, that being educational success or promotion to the next grade level. When a child is academically drowning in that ocean, moving the shoreline further away, requiring higher results on standardized tests, is not productive or effective. Maybe instead of only having a standards-based agenda, which focuses on raising the bar and assessing who makes the cut, we should consider a support-based agenda, which seeks to provide a strategic alignment and necessary resources so that every student will have the opportunity to reach that bar wherever it is set. Far too often, those who do not make the so-called cut are often and mistakenly labeled as students who are disinterested, slow, bad, or having an attention deficit disorder. My final point is economic disparity. Rich versus poor, the haves versus the have-nots. The Schott Foundation report states in far too many urban and rural areas, inadequate resource distribution policies and practices amount to education redlining. Effectively creating spaces in which where a student lives is more sufficient detriment of performance outcomes than any educational factors. Should we consider revamping of our educational tax base? I'm a proponent of that, but we want to hear what you have to say about all of those things. We're happy to see so many of you here, this being the first endeavor of this type. I'm excited about it. I know my county in Allegheny is excited about it, and I've spoken a lot with Bev about this endeavor as well. I believe that we can come up with some great ideas, but don't think that when you leave here today, everything's going to be solved, because it's not. This is just the beginning. And because you are here, we're going to have some high expectations from each of you as well as we continue on this fight for our kids. So thank you very much for being here this morning.
Well, I'd like to thank the Secretary and the Judge for their comments, and especially for commitment to this conference and to this network going forward. It's now my pleasure to introduce Joanne Edwards and Kyle Allen. They are with the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission.
Hello, you beautiful people, and thank you for inviting the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission to participate in the Dropout Prevention Summit. Every person in Pennsylvania has a legal right to an equal opportunity to get an education. Let me repeat that. Every person in Pennsylvania has a legal right to an equal opportunity to get an education. PHRC enforces Pennsylvania laws that prohibit discrimination in educational institutions. We protect that legal right. We work to educate students, parents, and school personnel on how to prevent discrimination and ensure equal educational opportunity. Most of us know that fear of bullying is a reason millions of students stay home from school in America every month. But you may not be aware that bullying can be harassment and illegal discrimination when it is motivated by a student's race, color, ancestry, national origin, religion, sex, or disability. According to the Justice Department, Pennsylvania ranks 4th in reported incidents of bullying. Disturbing numbers of Pennsylvania students are denied equal educational opportunity because of bullying. In fact, an estimated 1 out of every 10 students who drop out do so because they are bullied. Children with disabilities are 10 times more likely to be targets of bullying than their non-disabled peers. This issue demands our attention. PHRC is committed to reducing bullying as a barrier to equal opportunity in our schools. I want to introduce you to Kyle Allen, our staff education attorney. Kyle, can you come out, please? Kyle will elaborate on what you can do to recognize and prevent bullying as a form of illegal discrimination. Thank you. It's all yours, Kyle.
Thank you.
Good morning. You guys hear me okay? I can hear myself. My name is Kyle Allen. I'm an attorney in the Education and Community Services Division of the PHRC. Thank you to the Dropout Prevention Network for this invite to participate in your inaugural summit. I'd like to leave a couple minutes for questions at the end, so rather than go through the laundry list of educational inequities that fuel the dropout crisis, I'm just going to elaborate a little bit on bullying and harassment. So as Joanne noted, an unsafe atmosphere in school causes millions of students to stay home out of fear, and it causes some kids to drop out completely. Now I don't want to start off sounding unsympathetic, but for every victim of bullying, there's a bully. And what happens to this bully? Typically, he or she is suspended or expelled. But that usually doesn't correct the root of the problem. And we recognize that students with disciplinary problems are more likely to drop out of school. So we endeavor to work proactively to prevent bullying and harassment so that we can avoid the double effect that it has on both the victim and the victimizer. Now, despite our best efforts to work proactively, on average, I get about 2 to 3 calls every week from parents who tell me that their son or daughter is being bullied. More often than not, they tell me that they have nowhere else to turn, that no one will do anything to stop the bullying. And after receiving repeated calls, I began to ask myself, why do these parents tell me that they have nowhere else to turn? And why do they turn to the PHRC as a last resort? The PHRC is a civil rights law enforcement agency in the Commonwealth. Our specialty, among other areas of expertise, is in addressing discrimination and harassment in schools. Now, I think the reason parents don't immediately contact PHRC is because oftentimes bullying is not recognized for what it actually is: unlawful harassment. More often than not, as I ask parents about the harm being inflicted or the potential motivation of the bully, I hear stories that demonstrate to me that what's happening to their child is not actually bullying. It sounds to me like harassment. Now, in some cases, it doesn't take a lawyer to identify harassment. Verbal or written remarks or physical assaults, together with racial epithets or hateful comments regarding a protected class, these things are pretty easy to identify as racial, sexual, or disability harassment. But it's understandable that bullying and harassment often overlap. And so it's important to understand some of the subtleties in order to understand your rights under the law. And one of the more misunderstood areas of harassment that often masks itself as bullying is gender stereotyping. Now, this type of harassment largely affects students who identify as LGBT. Now, of course, the PHRC clearly recognizes that we do not have jurisdiction over harassment related specifically to sexual orientation. However, harassment of any student because he or she is perceived as someone who has failed to conform to a socially constructed gender stereotype is actually harassment based on sex, which is protected by the Human Relations Act. Now, I don't want to dwell too much on this, but I think it's important to mention because, like disabled students, LGBT students are targeted at a much higher rate than their peers. So going back to what I said about jurisdiction, like harassment based on sexual orientation, we recognize that acts of harm committed in schools are not always within the jurisdiction of the Human Relations Act. But this is why we value being a part of the Dropout Prevention Network. Our executive director, Joanne Edwards, has long stressed the power of partnerships. And so we've made great efforts to partner with other groups so that we can call on our network to form a unified front against discrimination and other educational inequities. Now, before I open it up for questions, I want to encourage you to contact the PHRC if issues related to discrimination arise in your local schools or anywhere else. We're available to answer your questions regarding your right to live, work, and be educated free from discrimination in the Commonwealth. We also offer free training related to equal opportunity, anti-discrimination, and cultural competency. The Human Relations Commission emphasizes a proactive approach to prevent discrimination. And we believe this can be accomplished through education, training, and enforcement of the Human Relations Act. So if you have any questions, if we have time, I know we're running a little off schedule. If anyone has any questions specifically regarding harassment, bullying, I'd be more than happy to give it a shot. Not seeing any, I'll relinquish the floor. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Joanne and Kyle for their comments and for being here, part of our conference. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Deputy Secretary Dr. Carolyn Demarest, and she was with the Department of Education, and we're pleased to have her. Carolyn.
It's okay to stumble over the name. It took me a while to learn how to say it and spell it. But when your maiden name was Cantagalli, you got used to it. I was the last child on all the standardized tests to fill in all the bubbles, as we went through. Thank you so much for having me here today. And what I'd like to talk about first is to make sure that when we talk about dropout prevention, that we understand the matrix behind how dropout prevention is calculated at least for the Department of Education and federal reporting, as opposed to when we talk about graduation rate or when we talk about promotion rate. I think that's important because very shortly the department will be publishing something that we call the School Performance Profile, which will include data on every school building, public school building, including charter and cyber charters in the Commonwealth. And it will have statistics about achievement and about things like dropout rate and promotion rate. So federally, when we have to report dropout rate, dropout in a Pennsylvania public school is any student in grades 7 through 12, or what they call SUGs, which are secondary ungraded schools, AEDY, youth development centers, those types of things, who leaves school before graduation for any reason other than death, and who does not transfer to another school or institution. So when we report dropouts, we report them 7 through 12 under that definition. When we report graduation rate, and sometimes folks confuse it as the inverse of graduation rate, but it is not. Graduation rate, as you will see reported on the school performance profiles when they're published this fall, in fact measures students from 9 through 12 in those cohorts who do not graduate within 4 years. That's called the 4-year cohort rate. And then we also report a 5- and a 6-year cohort rate. The difference in that is obviously the grade span and the rationale behind the reporting. When you also will see promotion rates as part of the profile and the grade, if you will, that schools are given for academic health across the Commonwealth, promotion rate is the inverse of retention rate. Can you tell I was a math teacher? It's okay, I can't spell, so. The promotion rate is the inverse. It's everyone who wasn't promoted to the next year. Obviously, if you accelerate, that's great, and that helps. So now when we talk about dropout rates in Pennsylvania, the department does keep records and track as we watch the dropout rates across the Commonwealth. And it's interesting because sometimes you see those reported as countywide, or you see them reported as school-wide. And in fact, when we look at the statistics reported that way, while they're of concern, the highest, again, that was reported for the 11-12 data for a school-wide dropout rate was 7.96 of the population. And that's including all the students that have been outplaced and tracking now for the first time their graduation rates and combining it, reporting it back to the schools from which the students came. So if they're out in an AEDY program, they're in one of the YDC centers. We started to track those graduation rates also. Dropout rates. But however, when you look at school district statistics, it does mask some very serious problems. So for example, for the school district that has the highest school district dropout rate of 7.96, inside that is a high school with a 40% dropout rate, which then speaks to very clearly the need for intervention. So what are we going to do about the issue, and what have Pennsylvania's Department of Education done? And I would say in some very difficult times. As you know, we lost at the beginning of the Corbett administration the federal stimulus money that took $900 million out of public education. And we have been working very hard to rebuild the state share of that subsidy. And we will face another very difficult economic time as federal sequestration comes. Over the last few days, have been watching what is going to happen in the sequestration. Federally removed money from our career and technical schools, from our Title I monies. But we continue to look forward to what can we do with the limited resources that we have. I am so pleased to be a partner to an effort that the First Lady, Mrs. Corbett, is doing in opening doors, and I see on the program she will be a speaker here this afternoon. So I will say that we were thrilled when the First Lady decided to take dropout prevention, focusing at middle schools, grades 5, 6, 7, and 8, as her issue that she was going to tackle for the Commonwealth. It will be the first statewide intervention that couples data on dashboards, which are available in many states across the Commonwealth, with an early warning system for those grades and matches interventions to those. But more on that later this afternoon. Again, a proactive approach to try to handling the dropout prevention. Migrant education is also, we have a very high migrant population in Pennsylvania, and we have a very active migrant program, and we've been working for the last few years on our what we call the Migrant Education Diploma Project, which focuses at 8th through 12th graders and trying to raise not only for the students but for the parents graduation information. What does it take to graduate from a Pennsylvania high school, public high school? What does it take in the resources? How do you access aid for higher education? And that diploma project will come out with a toolkit and interventions. We've been piloting it in some of our schools this year, but again, focused at migrant education. We will have it out of our Office of Safe Schools, updating our truancy toolkit, which would be used for all students, and what are the appropriate interventions, which is a great marrying to the First Lady's Open Door program. And what are those interventions and community resources? Because it's important, and the reason that we are here is how do we marshal all of our efforts to prevent dropouts in the Pennsylvania public schools? Interesting to hear the last speaker talk about bullying. We have been working very hard to develop bullying training, awareness, interventions. I noticed the Cumberland Valley superintendent walk in. I don't know where you went, where you're sitting, but I'd like to do a call out to that program in positive peer pressure. Cumberland Valley has one of the best programs that is attacking the bullying problem in the Commonwealth by empowering peers to step in and intervene when they see bullying, because that's, again, what we all need to do. We have student assistance trainings that we do across the Commonwealth and in partnership with welfare as we reach out in trying to intervene before a student drops out by, again, peers and faculty to try to find the root cause, because it's so different for many of our children across the Commonwealth. We have a new program this year that we've been working with Lee Burkett, who's our Director of Career and Technology, to do something called Pathways, which reaches back for the students who maybe not focused at post-secondary education or four-year colleges, to in fact build what we call a pathway academic program that would, for example, in trades, there are many things that welders and builders and carpenters have in common as far as the core content, but to reach back and to build core content and then allow the branching off that brings in businesses and into our schools to help show that there are very good family-sustaining jobs in the trades in Pennsylvania. So that will find its way into a few of our schools to be piloted this year. We have excellence through Ochdale with the other deputy that is again shared with welfare, and Dr. Barb Mitzenberg, who's with the department that looks at early childhood programs as an intervention of making schools a good beginning for students. In that profile that you'll see this fall is a call out in the academic formula on Ready by 3, and thank you so much for mentioning that, which again, as we know by research, a child, if they aren't reading or computing at grade level, especially in the reading by 3rd grade, they are more at risk at dropping out. Inside that profile is not just a gotcha. It's not just, well, here's where you're strong and here's where you're weak, but also resources for schools and school superintendents to use to intervene, to help, and we're putting a heavy emphasis on Ready by 3. And finally, something that's near and dear to my heart is, for me, as an educator in public education for 44 years, it is very important for us to have the most effective teachers in the classrooms with our students. Oh, hi, Sybil, Harrisburg superintendent, God bless. It is very important for us to have the most effective educators and the strongest leaders. So we are launching, with, again, a great partnership with the legislature, a new teacher evaluation and principal evaluation system that will, again, give the supports to our teachers in effective instruction. And what is the language of effective instruction? What does a teacher do inside that classroom that moves student achievement, with the appropriate supports and leaders with our principals on how to go in and identify the weaknesses and the supports that we need. And again, that will be launched this September for the first time. We've been piloting for 3 years, and so we're ready to go. So we hope with the interventions, but the preventions that we have planned with the Department of Education and with the help of everyone that's here in the audience, and Secretary McGrath is a great partner, that we will make a difference in the lives of our children in Pennsylvania, because it's critically important that everyone graduate. Thank you so much.